perspectives from academia, industry, and government, and how they all play together. We've got a great roundup of panelists. We have Aaron Peterson, Wes Turner, Ken Zalewski, Jen Goodall.
I guess they can't hear you in the back. Maybe a little closer to the mic.
Jen Goodall, Vivian Lopez, and Will Schroeder, and Andy Cohens. We're going to have each person give a quick introduction, introduce who they are, and then we're going to kick it off with a question and then open it up to questions from the audience.
I'm Erin Peterson. I'm Executive Director of the Outer Curve Foundation, also a founding board member of World Relevant, and open source projects.
Hi, my name is Wesley Turner. I'm Director of Open Source Operations at Coursera. I'm an agent for making the VA's electronic health record open source and bringing out value. So that's my motivation.
Thanks. Turns out Wes and I were at RPI together too. Just found out. I'm Ken Zalewski. I manage the Application Development Department at the New York State Senate, and I'm also a city councilman for the city of Toronto.
I'm Jen Goodall. I am the director of the undergraduate program at the Informatics Department here at Lowell.
My name is Fabian Lopez. I work at DSS and I'm working as part of the management community development, the open source community development for the open source healthcare records. The name is Vista, so we'll see all the webinars and material. And right now the system is under implementation from the OMH, Office of Mental Health in New York, in 23 hospitals, 300 clinics. So if we are successful at the end of the process, maybe 3 or 4 years, it's going to be the biggest open source implementation on electronic health records outside of the
Hi, I'm Will Schroeder. I'm president and CEO of KitWare, an open source company for about 100 people up in Clifton Park, New York. I started working with open source in 1993. I'm really a developer. I still develop software. The system is called EPA. It's still around. It's still being used by national labs and all sorts of people around the world.
My name is Andy Cohens. I'm a consultant and program advisor. I work right now with the New York State Department of Health doing program evaluation, primarily in the realm of Medicaid, looking at cost-benefit analysis, impact analysis, and things like that.
So one of the things that we wanted to bring up on the panel, or to the panel, is the importance of higher education curricula. It impacts universities, it impacts industry, and impacts government. If you guys could each speak to, especially again, your perspectives on how open source can play into that, the importance of that, what industry can do to help universities develop curricula that prepare students for entering the workforce.
So I actually feel like that was a bit of a loaded question. As we were going down the line here, I realized I've worked with almost everybody on internships for our students. So I think that's one aspect of the relationship between industry and academia, is to sort of get our students out there and doing real work and having real experiences. And I sort of say it's a bit of a loaded question because KitWare has actually been teaching a class for us for 4 semesters. And this semester, I think Lewis is teaching 2 classes. And in the fall, we're trying to get him to teach 3 classes. So it's a pretty tight relationship. I here.
Sorry.
And not only sort of having Lewis Avinas from KitWare is teaching the classes for us, he's brought in other employers to meet with our students. Our students have done internships, but he's also worked with a lot of our instructors so that sort of the power of one has become the power of a whole team of people. So it's a pretty strong relationship. I think my philosophy on undergraduate education in particular is that students should have lots of experience, and at the end of their schooling, they should be able to get a job. I say this as a classics major who clearly did not get a job in Greek and Latin. So I think it's important. So we're definitely open to giving students those kinds of opportunities, both in classes and things like internships. Does that address what
From an industry perspective, is there things that folks are presenting that that you are looking for from students that either they're now starting to bring as prospective employees or things that they're not, and ways that you could see academia helping fill that gap.
Before I pass off the mic, if somebody can take notes on this answer for me, I'd appreciate it.
We're videotaping.
Okay, all right.
So in our perspective, I can see the two types of different students when we talk to the program. We have the med students, the pre-med students, because basically we have the front end, the end user of the system, we train physicians, nurses. On the other side, we need the IT, the computer sciences students also to know about the system. So it can be an ideal lab to have both groups of students with the different type of programs working together. I mean, while one are learning how to use the technology, the other one's going to be learning how to use the system. But what we need from another perspective is to try to get those students who already did some training, because the type of implementation we do, kind of training, is hard for us to start teaching students in internship. We prefer to give them more participation during implementation so they can learn more, but we need to have them previous knowledge about the system. But in our company, our company is based in South Florida. We have students doing internship and learning, and most of them actually they continue working with us.
If you look at modern software systems these days, they're really big and they're really complicated. And that means you need lots of people to work simultaneously together on them. And that's why open source is so important, because you don't need those IT barriers. But as far as what students can do, there's a lot of things that can be done at a very practical level, like developing communities and practicing working in communities. And that includes not only the sort of the interpersonal relationships that have to be managed. You have to know how to send email in a polite way, you have to know how to argue and state your case in a polite way. Of course, technical excellence is really great, but really I think the bottom line is you just need experience working in a really large community. So setting up sort of groups that are maybe a little bit bigger than you might have done in the past, and also maybe engaging with open source communities, the right communities that are friendly to students. I think those are two very simple things people can do.
I think it's really an interesting time to be a student getting ready to come out into the working world, because I can think of no other time in the last 50 years or so where it was this easy to go out onto the internet and grab hold of the actual tools that are being used in industry and in government. You can walk out to Amazon, spin up the Postgres server, load R onto your computer, and 20 minutes later, you can be downloading and analyzing census data. If you go back to 1950 and tell someone that a student in college could spin up an entire analytics system in 25 minutes and be doing the same type of analysis as someone with a PhD in as you would here at school, they would have laughed at you. But you can actually go do that, and it's going to cost you about $4 for the afternoon, which is less than you would spend at McDonald's, and this is a better value than McDonald's. But these are real tools, and what I'm seeing from my perspective is that what's exciting about that is that people can get a hold of that and use it. But what's frustrating is that there aren't enough people who know how to use those types of tools. I have a very hard time finding people to hire who can sit down and are as comfortable talking statistics as they are talking the details of mental health or program development as they are talking about relational databases. It's not just knowing how to code in Postgres or MySQL or whatever technology. It's being able to go from the technology to the practical application and be able to connect all those dots in a row that really, really, really are going to make someone really exciting in the workplace when you hire them.
I'm actually going to be repeating some of what was said, of course, but from my perspective, internships have been golden for us at the New York State Senate. And in fact, case in point, Dima, one of our organizers here, was one of the first interns we had in our technology program at the Senate. We were using open source software at the time. Dima got involved in these projects where we're using open source software. Now she's a huge advocate for it, and we have conferences like this because of it. Braylon here at the Senate came from the Rensselaer Center for Open Source. RPI has a group of students that work on open source projects. More and more folks in academia are getting involved in open source and creating those relationships with private industry and with those folks that are in public service that have adopted open source software, like the state Senate, and we're trying to get more and more agencies and legislatures to get on board. But creating those relationships is key. In terms of what students, some of the things that we look for in students when we're, our internships are, they're unpaid, unfortunately. But we want to give students a really good experience. But what we're looking for generally, we now have a lot of students applying for our internship program, as the word's gotten out. Students that had previous experience with an open source project or using open source software. For example, a student that interviews with us and says, I have some projects up on GitHub. Thumbs up, we're already saying, hey, you get what it's about. If you've used an open source bug tracking system like Redmine or like Bugzilla or Track, those types of things. And again, like Andy mentioned, all of these tools are available easily to everybody. We can all just go start downloading the web server, LampStack, bug tracking systems, and start playing around with them. So there's really now, in today's environment, there's no excuse for any student not to have at least some experience in some type of open source project. And when you come in and you're talking to employers or government agencies, being able to speak to that does wonders for you and your chances at not only getting an internship, but getting hired later on.
So, Kenny was just talking about some of the benefits. I want to go just a little bit of a different direction because, when we put out problems in open source, they're available for everybody to look at. You may have the solution, but even if you don't have the solution, one of the best things you can do to hone your art is to practice your art. So there's an added benefit by just engaging with these communities. You get the opportunity to look at problems from a different way. You get the opportunity to look at other people's solutions to problems that you understand. So it's a good way to go about walking through and making sure that you know what your art's about. You can hone your skills, you can prepare yourself, and you can prepare a resume that's visible online. And like I just said, you can download it, you can look at what you've done and what you've accomplished as you're kind of taking this educational journey on your own speed and your own time.
I took off last summer for a sabbatical to focus specifically on education. Because when I was running my engineering teams, I found it really difficult to find people to hire for my teams. And so last summer I focused on finding and solving the education gap in younger kids and also with adults. And I just spoke at Southwest EDU on this topic. Specifically speaking to people coming out of college programs, one of the things that I've observed, and it may be a generational thing, and maybe other people here can speak for as well, is that there seems to be this sense that everything has to be done perfectly all the time. You have to get straight A's when you command programs to get jobs. And I don't know about other people, I actually have a bias toward hiring B players and B+. Because to me, when somebody has perfect straight A's, that means they're used to always having the answer, getting it exactly right, and they probably haven't had the opportunity or taken the opportunity to experiment and fail and find the edges of their knowledge. When you're looking at people with E's and B+, they've probably taken the opportunity to do that. So frankly, for me, straight A's makes me a little bit nervous. When you're working with open source projects, there are a lot of projects that are available. And I rarely see people at the undergraduate level or just at an undergraduate tackling those because they don't want to look wrong in front of other people on the projects. And it's really important to understand that when you move into professional developer roles, you're going to be wrong all the time. And part about being a good team member is being comfortable being wrong, fessing up to errors quickly, and finding somebody who can help you solve them. So, including the process. 3.7.
So, are there any further questions we'd like to pull into the audience? If you think of something while we're going, please feel free to just raise your hand, stand up and shout. Sort of like this, and Aaron, you touched somewhat on this in your keynote this morning. When technology decisions are now made by a range of people, you have MBA holding business leaders and PhD researchers, and all of those people are part of technology decisions. How do you guys explain or propose open source solutions so that it is understandable and appealing to a range of stakeholders.
Sometimes I hide my projects. That happens. I'm sure other people here at the table have done that as well. It's surprising to me that there are a lot of business people who don't understand fundamental technology concepts. And so oftentimes, all they want to do is understand that you're not giving something away for free. And so being able to demonstrate where you're going to either show cost savings or show increased marketing or product sales associated with open sourcing project is the fastest way to solve those arguments. One of the interesting challenges, and I don't know if anybody else in the panel has experienced this, but for product managers now who are used to be able to go with an engineering team, in most cultures, this isn't for great technology-centric cultures, but product managers are used to going to technologists or engineering teams, giving them a feature list and saying, this is what I want, this is what I want to buy. And that approach does not work with open source projects. And so helping product managers figure out how to harness the natural direction and inclination of the community is really important for helping them get products both and taking them to market.
So we're working on deploying an open source community for Vista, VAs, trying to help record. And you see some people from that community, such as Bobby Lopez, even at this table. And what we have to try to do is reach out to them and get them to go in past the idea of code benefits, the service that they offer you. So what we try to do is we try to point out the advantages of being in the mainstream, having your code in a supported system that other people are going to help test, and that other people have to write their code around so that it remains compliant with your code as you move forward. This saves you a lot of re-engineering time. We try to make the case that by staying in the mainstream, by staying in this group of people who are moving together, you get the benefit of large numbers of people. We're kind of lucky in that in the monks environment, it's really not all that easy to fork and come back together again. So as soon as you fork, you've made a maintenance nightmare for yourself in some sense. And the farther you get away from the mainstream, the harder it is to get back. So we try to use that as kind of a good way to keep people to come back to us and go back.
I live in two different worlds when it comes to organizations adopting and using open source software and developing in an open source manner. The state Senate, we cleared this hurdle years ago. So it's not a matter of convincing stakeholders any longer about whether we use open source software. It's just part of the culture now. We were lucky that about 4 or 5 years ago, we had a CIO for the Senate who was very much on board with the use of open source software and encouraged its use. And now it's just a given. Our projects generally use open source software wherever possible. And if we're not using open source software, we have to pretty much give a pretty good reason why that's the case. Now, in my other life as a Troy City Councilman, it's the opposite. The City of Troy has almost no desire or no inclination or no knowledge about the benefits of open source software. So I'm actually, over the last several years, trying very hard, struggling to get the city to get on board with the use of open source software and trying to make the case that it's not just the coolness factor, because, you know, the City of Troy doesn't really care to be that cool, it just wants to get its work done. But it's also, there's an economic benefit to it that, you know, I'm trying to show them that you're spending X number of dollars every year on Microsoft licenses, on Office licenses, and on time tracking software. We're currently in a debate in the City of Troy over time and attendance software and how there's open source solutions that we can purchase. Actually, there's some that you can download for free, and there's others that you can purchase for probably 1/3, 1/4 of the cost that some of the systems that the City of Troy was looking at. So in my full-time job as a programmer at the State Senate, it's just part of the culture. It's baked in. There's no question about it anymore. In my other part-time life as a councilman, I am doing everything I can to try and get the City of Troy to adopt open source software. And part of that is educational, and part of it, of course, is cultural. And there's history and tradition in the city, and you know, a lot of municipalities are they're nervous about moving towards something it's the unknown. You know, what does it mean to move into open source software? And we have to show that, look, we're not alone. The city of Troy will not be alone once we start doing this. We have, you know, RPI sitting on the hill there with dozens of students that are involved in the Rensselaer Center for Open Source. And we've got Russell Sage and Emma Willard in Hudson Valley. All of these schools are using and familiar with open source software. So it's a matter of, you know, creating those partnerships and trying to rid ourselves of that nervous angst in moving into this new realm. And I say new realm in quotes because it's really not new anymore, but for the city of Troy, it would be new.
I would go towards the direction of the economic aspect. When you have a hospital, you need to run health records and try to see all the commercial solutions that are available. Up front, you need to maybe invest like $10 million just for the license. And then you need to start thinking about another 10 or 15 million for services like implementation, training, customizations. With the open source solution that we're proposing, which is we're trying to get like the core system is open source with the type of license that you can mix all proprietary products and open source products. You don't have to pay that upfront money with license. So you're saving right there like $10 million that you can use in better equipment, training, or improving the facilities. So this is kind of the key points in our approach and how to show them the importance of deciding about a fully commercial product or an open source product. And then when they see the first aspect, they can also see, in our case, the kind of open source project because it's already used on the Veterans Affairs with millions of patients and also more than 1,000 facilities. So they can see any doctors or nurses that do the protection inside the VA, they can testify how good the system does. So they can support that VA. I understand it's a challenge for the decision makers to decide going or not going open source, but when they're gathering all those facts, they can prove to the rest of the community that good is going in the direction.
One of the things that we try and avoid is there's sort of a couple ways to talk about open source. One way is to evangelize it. And that is probably not the right way when talking when you're in a business meeting, right? Open source doesn't evangelize. I mean, in a meeting like this or talking to students where people understand these sort of philosophical issues, it makes a lot of sense. When you're in a business meeting, you need to just point out simple things like reduced acquisition costs. Now, these guys have talked about this already, but we tend to go beyond that. We're scientific researchers in our company, and we do a lot of R&D. So there's things like scalability development, there's agile development models, there's the maintenance issues. A lot of times customers want to build stuff, and if they can put it in an open source product, they don't have to worry about maintenance quite as much. So it lowers the cost of long-time maintenance. So there's another big deal too is sort of the vendor lock-in, which is a huge issue in government right now. In the past, the government has often paid for products that are closed, cost many millions of dollars, and then the government has to continue to pay for the maintenance again and again. And then the company abandons the product or goes out of business, and it just makes program managers and government agents really upset. So when you buy an open source, you buy into an open source product, you're buying into a community, you're buying into a long-term viable solution. So if your current open source vendor is supporting something and you don't like them, get rid of them. You move on or you develop on your own. So avoiding vendor locking is also another business advantage. So, you know, we don't evangelize except in the right audience like this one, but we talk about the manifest benefits, sales, agile development, and all sorts of things, R&D. Just make it a no-brainer. Once you understand that you can't use closed systems, it just doesn't work out.
I hope to have a much more interesting answer to this next year. I just recently started with the Department of Health, and unlike the New York State Senate, there is no culture of open source software within the Department of Health. I'm currently actively asking myself the exact question that this question is how to move it in that direction, because I'm finding it very difficult to work in an environment both on two sides of it. On the one hand, a lot of people who work in the Department of Health and program evaluation do not see themselves as software developers, which is fascinating since they write programs all the time. And secondly, they are used to using very closed tools such as Oracle, such as SAS, which are very difficult to work with, and it's very difficult to make you do interesting things quickly. And so I'm actually going to hopefully have a much better answer for how I succeeded in moving the culture in the direction of using various things next year. So I'm going to definitely talk.
You can stand up and shout.
So I came from a specialist domain where I didn't really learn how to program in my actual academic program at all. But I'm wondering if the panel has thoughts on when you've got people working in things like physics and chemistry, they're not necessarily formally taught how to program. You might be taught how to do things like mathematics. But how do we bring at least some degree of literacy to those domains, help scientists, engineers, and others take a more active role in these open source projects that are developing, and then help reward them for that, so they can develop these skills that are useful to industry, and then actually go out into the real world, or remain as people who are professors, but also see rewards beyond the H impacts and the normal impact factors that we're currently assessing. Does that make sense?
Somehow the mic needed me. So I was at an open source think tank earlier this week, and it was actually at Sarah, because they were a case study last year. And somebody said, well, how do we make more developers contribute? The reality is you can't make developers do anything, and you can't make physicists become developers. What you can do is cause them to feel their own pain and realize that they can solve their own problem. People respond to pain. Physicists, scientists, developers, they have a pain point. Nobody else is solving it fast enough. Give them the tools to help them figure out how to solve it. That's a way to do it. I think what you're asking is, how do we help those communities become more engaged to increase the population of developers overall? Is that perhaps was the kind of question?
Maybe find ways into these programs to at least give them some starting points. How might you better engage those?
Sure. So for Girl Development, which is ironically named, it's a programming nonprofit aimed at adults. And it's aimed at bringing more people, particularly women, but people in code-adjacent roles, so program managers in technical companies, or scientists who don't know how to code, and teaching them how to code. We've developed this as a curriculum that is learned really quickly. You can learn, HTML, you can learn Python in 6 weeks. And what we're finding is that by making those programs available to them and giving them cases they can work on, we do a lot of partnership with another nonprofit called Code Montage. You guys know what Code Montage is? Or you guys all want Code Montage? So Code Montage identifies open source projects that are easy to contribute to, have an easy entry path for non-developers, and contribute to a humanitarian good. So there's a lot of overlap there with various science projects and research projects, and that's a great way to move people together and start.
So actually, I like that answer a lot. And part of what we're dealing with on Coursera is we inherited a big base of code, and our job isn't so much to get people to come from physics and help us solve our problems, but it's to get people who aren't used to test-driven development or aren't used to formal ways of contributing code, find ways to bring them into the community. So we do a lot of encouraging, but we're also working iteratively to adapt our tools, try to make it easier. When somebody complains about something, we take a good hard look at it and see, can we make this simpler? Can we make it easier to contribute to? Can we improve the process so that the pain point isn't in contributing code or isn't in working with the community, but is instead the actual pain that they feel on not being able to solve their problems. The pain on solving their problems is higher than the barrier to contribute or participate in the community. Then we find we have a path forward. The pain to contribute is so high that it makes the other pain feel like a stuck toe. No one wants to come in. And really, we're trying that. We're trying webinars. We're trying as many different ways of lowering that pain point as possible to try to move forward. And if you have any good suggestions, we're continuing that. We are happy to hear them.
Funny, all this talk of pain, I thought taking physics as a major is enough pain, right? I guess to add to that, contributing on an open source project doesn't mean just being a software developer, right? You don't have to just contribute code. You can contribute designs. You can contribute your time to test software, as Wes mentioned. You can contribute documentation. I think we always overlook documentation, especially on open source projects, right? Your average proprietary commercial software typically is well documented because you've got a company behind it documenting it. A lot of open source projects come up short. A lot actually do have good documentation, but that might be a way to get plugged in where you're learning about an open source project, and as you're learning it, you're documenting what you're learning so that those that come after you can also benefit.
I think your question, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to get more and more diverse students taking computing classes in general. So it's something that we do think about a lot. And I think to sort of reiterate, one way to do that is to make it really relevant so that it's not just for the sake of writing code or for the sake of, hello world. But to say, like, okay, so this is what you really love, but here's why it's really important that you understand it. And I can just give an example. We just started to offer a couple of weeks ago a course in Vista, and we advertised it to the pre-med advisor. And it was like, why haven't we thought of this before? And they loved it, and she just took it and ran with it. So, but I think that we have to sort of, part of it is in the marketing and how we present it, that it's not just another coding class, but this is really, you actually need this for what you want to accomplish. It's being able to solve your problems. So I think part of it is marketing, how we, to attract a more diverse set of students.
I'm going to reinforce that, and also what I said before, how important it is to learn how to play as a team player inside the community. As you can see, many companies are adopting agile development and Scrum, one of the most used frameworks. And basically, in the Scrum group, you have the developer, you have the Scrum Master, but you also have the product owner. So for us, the reason we have all these webinars and all the training, our audience is more targeted to those users of the system. So we need the doctor, we need the nurse, from concept to launch, we need to be providing ideas. Like the doctor can say, I would like to see my patient picture and also see all my demographics. Or other person can say, I would like to see all the billing code. You have a accounting person that can be part of the team, you have a physician that can be part of the team. You have a developer, you have a designer, you have a person that's expert in technical writing. So you can see, it has to be a team, has to be a community development. So that's why it's so important for you to get engaged with those communities and start interacting in a social way, like when we're using Facebook, like from the technical point of view, just be more active. Don't think about learning a new language if you don't like to be programming, but maybe you can be good in studying Arabic or providing good requirements to the open source community. We, on the Vista Extension Hub, we're trying to promote the development of the small extensions. So, like, or maybe an idea, and a developer say, I can do that. They start communicating each other, so you can be a developer who knows Vista, MAMS, Delphi, or whatever, and then start building that group, then start a project, create public extension, or partner extension. And that's the idea of working as a community. So when we talk about open source, like you say recently, don't think about this, I need to be a programmer, I need to learn more about computing. No, you can be a new professional. You can be with a good person, and you can be a big player in that role as always.
In my experience, PhD physicists are untrainable. So I wouldn't try to train them to do any software. Rather, I would like to agree with the gentleman, which is the engineering community to address the problems. So, in an example from our area of research, we tend to put together teams. Often, there's three major groups. You typically have software people, you have algorithms people, because they tend to be in software people, and you have scientists of some sort, biologists, physicists. And those people need to be aware of the terminology and be able to communicate various terms and issues amongst themselves. And then you can create separate pieces, like training, dissemination, management, that sort of thing. But I agree, engineering the community, I think, is a better way to do it than trying to teach physicists how to program.
I might start off by hopefully disagreeing, although I don't work with physicists, so perhaps I'm ignorant. I mostly work people with masters in public health, social work, etc. And I'm increasingly becoming of the opinion that basic software skills are absolutely critical to the actual implementation of modern science and modern research. And there's actually a program that you can go through. It's a thing called software carpentry, which is ironically developed by a guy who's a physicist. And he decided that he needed to become better at software development, and they run what they call boot camps around the country, mostly in North America, where they come in and they teach everything. They actually use Python. I'm sure Hitler would like that. But they teach Python, they teach Git, they teach basic software development skills. They teach what is a unit test, why is it relevant, how does this actually help you in doing science. And what I'm sitting here trying to do is trying to figure out how to take that and dumb it down to people with MPHs and social work. I mean, bring it up to the people with the social work degrees. I misspoke. I don't even know what social work is. There's two and I'm married to one of them. I'm married to the other one, so. But no, I do think it is possible, and I think having those basic things are really important for a lot of scientific development and thinking about those types of things, because it enhances the communication. Because in the Department of Health, I see a huge divide between the masters of the Oracle system, who have got themselves up on a pedestal and they're all kind of working their magic, and then the people who are doing the SAS work, who have absolutely no idea which stick to stick in the hole to make Oracle do things. So trying to find ways of getting that communication together through education, I think, is really important.
So John, one of the things that you mentioned was the VISTA class, and that you brought that to other folks here who are not necessarily your CS students that, and that, wow, we're really excited about it, and it's a concrete way to say, hey, look, we'll get, the right people together and sort of fuel this from not just a CS perspective. Are there other concrete ideas, sort of, how do you get a physicist involved in learning the tools? Are there other concrete examples of collaborations that you guys either are seeing now that are being really successful or things that you would like to see?
I think one of the things that's really interesting, and this is very much in the culture of open source, because of the fact that the software is available and open, is one of the things that I think that I've had some success with talking to the people in the Department of Health with, is showing them some of our community blogs and showing them examples of how people are doing really interesting and exciting things with that technology to actually get them interested in learning, okay, wow, how can I do that? Trying to get them going more in the direction of that, because they're so much more used to working, imagining the science as being something that's closed off, that's done in a silo and privately, and instead here's this entire world taking the science, throwing it out on the internet and saying, wow, let's talk about it. And that is a fundamental shift in approach that I think a lot of people may find more exciting than they realize.
I would just say that it's a very informatics-y kind of thing to put a team of people together, and I really appreciated your answer about having a team, everybody to bring their perspectives to make the project stronger. We are open, to this sort of. I feel like I maybe asked you to ask that question. I didn't, but I'm interested in the answers.
So we've been talking about open source a lot. Open source is great, but a lot of what we do is exists in a vacuum once we have data. So the collaborations I would like to see are collaborations between the consumers of the information and the users of the information and the producers of the information. And as we move more towards open data and data repositories that work with our open source software, what we start to do is feel something very powerful. We go in and we have access to data that was unthinkable years ago. There was a New York State initiative a few months back, Health 2.0. They did an open source hackathon, sourcing on ideas to lower or improve incidence rates of youth onset diabetes. We had a team there with some people from the University of Albany. It was a lot of fun, but it was part of what this new collaboration has to look like. It started getting the data producers in together with the people who can use and leverage the data, and move that out to the users of the information and make decisions and help improve the use of the world.
One of the things that I would like to see change in communities, I know that as somebody who spent the last 15, 20 years working around an engineer 60, 70, 80 hours a week, like many people in my community, I can be sarcastic, and when interrupted, I can be at best impatient and brusque. And it took me a long time as I became a leader to understand the degree to which my being abrasive chased people out of the engineering community, chased people off projects that they otherwise would have been long-term contributors to. And I find that particularly for a lot of people in software engineering, they've developed their social skills in high school, for college, they don't think of themselves as leaders in their communities, and some of them are sarcastic and brusque and impatient. They don't realize that they are perhaps chasing people away. Now what I've started teaching younger engineers to do is that if somebody asks you a question, that default makes you a leader. You are leading them through to an answer, and you have a sense of power and responsibility as a leader. And I'm not telling anyone not to be sarcastic and brusque. Personally, I like working around people who are sarcastic and brusque. But to just tone it down and just be a tiny bit more kind and demonstrate a little bit more patience and just make it just a little bit extra effort sometimes to make sure people feel welcome contributing to the projects and welcome being part of the communities goes a long way towards securing that long-term participation that we're all going to try and have.
I'll take over on the first view of the right place. So what we're trying to stand up in our world is we believe firmly that code that isn't tested is broken. But that doesn't matter whether it's our code as an open source thing or Microsoft's code. It's not tested, it's broken. So we have dashboards, we like to point to them, we like to point to a suite of tests that actually demonstrate certain aspects of the code. Now, for the Osera project, we started out with hundreds of thousands of lines of untested code, or tested code for which we didn't have repeatable unit tests for. And we're starting to build up that corpus of testing, exactly an answer to the question you're raising here. How do we know that this works and that this is code that we can trust as a good quality? That's what we try to do, is we try to back it up with concrete, objectionable, or objective data that actually shows error-free code when errors show up in the code or are observed or discovered. We write a test that covers that case, demonstrating the error, and then fix it. And by being able to point to this, we can build up a lot of confidence in code beyond the fact that it's open source. And open source, we can actually point to those tests, let you download and look at and observe those tests as well, or you can run them yourself, which is something that closed source solution can do.
We have time maybe for one other person to address that, and then I think we have to wrap up.
I'm trying to go super fast. The Senate, we've hosted some events called Capital Camp, which are bar camps, and we've invited people from industry, from government, from academia, and we've all come together and talked about technology and how we use it in government and elsewhere. And one of the most common questions we've gotten when we talk about the fact that we use open source software throughout the Senate is, how can you do that? Open source software is not secure. Everyone can look at the code. How do you guys get away with doing that? And our answer has always been, the more eyes on the code, the better. Because it's not like the whole community of developers out there are all looking to break systems. Right? Most developers out there to do good. Open source software and collaborative development is about doing good in the world. The more people you have in software, the faster any types of security holes get found and fixed. When there's a security hole found in the Apache server, for example, it's typically fixed, if not days, it's hours. So, again, in the Senate, we didn't have to do a lot of convincing because the people that were making decisions already knew the benefits of open source software, the fact that there are no inherent insecurities, any more so than any other software, except for the fact that because you have more eyes on open source tools and applications, you can find problems faster and get them fixed faster, and therefore we find it to be more secure, not less secure. But other agencies are not there yet, so that's why we always get asked that question. We just talk about our own experience, that we, knock on wood right now, we haven't had any break-ins in the Senate, no one's abused our software, and things are running great, but we find it to be secure software, and more secure than proprietary software.
We could give a nice thank you, and I think we have to